where hundreds of protesters gathered outside Australia's Parliament House in Canberra on Wednesday to demonstrate against the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. The protests sparked by Herzog's trip have been seen across Australia, with clashes between police and demonstrators in Sydney earlier this week. Protesters have called for condemnation of Israeli government actions in Gaza and the West Bank. Despite tension, Australian leaders urged that protests remain peaceful. Earlier in the day, Herzog received a ceremonial welcome at Government House, where he met with Governor-General Sam Mostyn and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Let's listen in to the protesters.
I think it's even less appropriate for him to come here because it's demonstrating his link between the Israeli government and the Australian government. And I think we should be condemning the Israeli government for all that it's done in Gaza and the West Bank.
And I feel very strongly, as to my family, that Israel's representative should not be here.
All right, Professor Rohan Gunratna requested to join us back in this discussion. Now, even if we are giving this news, protesters are planning more protests in Australia. So clearly they're not stepping back. How is Israel really going to view the protests against its regime in Australia?
In this day and age, protests are there everywhere. Certainly the number of protesters are very small, it's minute, it is insignificant compared to the population of Australia. It is only a few thousand protesters that have gathered at these protest venues, and I think that it is so important for the Israeli president not to focus on those protests because Australia is a liberal democracy. Certainly, the Israeli response after the brutal Hamas attack in 2023, October 7, 2023, was overwhelming. But at the same time, the intention was to dismantle Hamas, and whether anyone likes it or not, Hamas will be dismantled. Not only Hamas, but the 9 other groups that participated with Hamas to conduct killings, maimings, injuries, raping, and hostage takings in Israel. So the Australians are aware of this. Government to government, the relationship will continue between the vast majority of the people of Australia and Israel. The relationship is excellent. This is a very small group of people who have been radicalized, who do not understand the importance of governments responding to terrorist attacks that are protesting. Certainly there were excesses. The Israeli response was overwhelming. There were civilian deaths. But I personally believe that President Herzog himself was not responsible for those civilian deaths, and he came to Australia after a very brutal attack by ISIS or the Islamic State. It was a family-based attack by father and son, and that is because of what you call family radicalization. That is, a segment of the Muslim community in Australia has been radicalized, and this the Australian government has to address, prevent extremist preachers, hate preachers from preaching in Australia. Those hate preachers should be locked up, and they should not be allowed to step into Australia. And if there are any operating in Australia, government of Australia should give them long-term prison sentences.
Well, the protesters are calling for sanctions on Israel. Do you think the government is going to relent to popular pressure?
Certainly government will not, because it's not a real popular pressure. It's a few thousand protesters, and Australia and Israel has had a very long friendship and cooperation. Israel is doing very well economically, and I think that even if the Australians want to sanction Israel, Israel will boom, because Israel has build a very close friendship with many other countries, especially with the United States. The US President, US Secretary of War, has called Israel a model ally. And I think that the Australian protests is a part of the Australian culture of permitting dissent, and those protests will continue.
All right, Professor, do stay on with me as we now move on, viewers. Let's tell you some details as far as the Ukraine war is concerned. President